This controversy about Thanksgiving in the United States is a question that I needed to learn more about a few years ago. And over time, I've learned more and more about it. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. But to really understand, we need to go back a little bit and learn a little bit more about the history and help you to understand what the controversy is, because I want to know what you think. So I want to set aside, this is to set something aside. I want to set aside the controversy for now and go back and look a little bit into the history of this holiday or this celebration in the United States. When I was a child, we learned about Thanksgiving in grade school. In every grade, we talked about Thanksgiving. We did special projects around Thanksgiving. And what we learned was that when the pilgrims came from Europe to what is now the United States, there were indigenous people living here, people who had already lived here, people that we now call Native Americans. But at that time, when I was a child, we called them Indians. There's a whole story about that. Do you know why we called them Indians? It's more appropriate, I would say now, to call them Native Americans or American Indians. But again, putting that aside, when I was a child, we learned that these indigenous people were very helpful to the pilgrims, who were the people who came here from Europe. And when there were very difficult times because the Europeans did not know how to live in this new world, new to them, they didn't know how to raise food, they didn't know how to handle the extreme cold. The indigenous people, the native people, really helped out the people who had come here from Europe. And because of this, after the time that the people harvested the things that they had planted, in other words, they had grown fruits and vegetables, and when they picked those fruits and vegetables, when they harvested those fruits and vegetables, they had a dinner together to celebrate and to thank the Native Americans. Now, this is where a lot of the controversy comes from, and you might be asking yourself, why is that controversial? I want to tell you some more about that. But first, I will say that a lot of people think that this is really the history of this holiday, of this celebration. But there's actually more history than that. In the United States, it has a lot to do with our Civil War, which was fought during the 1800s. And you may know that our President Abraham Lincoln was very involved in the Civil War. But it actually involves more than that, something that I think almost no one really knows about. If they do, I've never talked to them. I just learned it this year, which is that a woman was responsible for really advocating for a holiday about gratitude and being thankful. Now, of course, I would say that this is a remarkable woman. And if you have not watched my series about remarkable women in the United States, I will link it below and maybe above so that you can watch some of those videos to continue becoming more fluent. But this woman, I wrote her name down here so I was sure to get it correct since I have not heard of her before. Her name was Sarah Josepha Hale, and she lived from 1788 to 1879. And she was advocating for a celebration, a tradition in the United States where we would celebrate gratitude. Now, if you've watched very many of my videos, you know this is close to my heart. This is something that's very important to me. She worked on this for 17 years, and finally, President Lincoln created or made Thanksgiving a holiday where we would celebrate thankfulness, gratitude, in hopes that this would bring the country together, have the country be more united, because at this time of the Civil War, we were not united, we were divided. And there is a lot to learn about the Civil War. Sarah Josepha Hale was a remarkable woman who not only advocated for Thanksgiving, but she was a well-known writer at the time. And she is best known for a nursery rhyme that I think almost all children in the United States learn when they are very small, maybe even as small as 2 or 3 or 4 years old. And the nursery rhyme is Mary Had a Little Lamb. I did not know that Mary Had a Little Lamb and the author of that had anything to do with Thanksgiving. So for me, it's very fun to be learning this new information. But also, this is a quilt that I made, a piece of art I made about this nursery rhyme. In this picture, you can see I made the image out of fabric. Fabric or cloth is what we make our clothing out of. And you can see here that I have a picture of a little girl who is Mary and the little lamb. And the nursery rhyme starts with, Mary had a little lamb, fleece was white as snow. So the fleece of a lamb is what we might call on another animal, the fur. The fur was white as snow. If you do not know this nursery rhyme, I will put it in the description below. It would be a great thing to use if you are teaching English to your children at home. So this is one of the things that Sarah Josepha Hale is famous for. And she also contributed greatly to this celebration of Thanksgiving. Oh, and I don't want to forget to include one more thing about Ms. Hale, which is that although she tended to be quite conservative in her thoughts, she did think that the education of women was very important, which at that time was very liberal thinking, very forward thinking. I agree with her. It really doesn't matter if you're liberal or conservative, educating people is a very good thing. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with this? I think the most important thing for this story is to realize that a lot of the history of the United States has to do with that division that was happening around the time of the Civil War. President Lincoln was the one who got this celebration started, and President Roosevelt also contributed to this later as to when we celebrate Thanksgiving. But I think that one of the most important parts for me is this part of the history. Now, having said that, I think the rest of the history is also very important, because the controversy about this holiday really comes from the idea that not all the Native Americans and not all the European Americans were happy to spend time together and celebrate together. In fact, some people would say none of them were. As you may have heard me say in my Thanksgiving video from last year, which I will put below and up above, I think that there is probably a lot of truth to that, because there were a lot of destructive things done at that time. And in many ways, the European Americans just stole land from the indigenous people. And of course, I do not agree with this. I do not think this is a good thing. And I do think it is an important part of our history to really know what the truth was of that time. And in addition to that, I also think that even in bad times, even in times where there are a lot of people doing very bad things, there are also people who are doing good things. And I think that it is very likely that there were some, even if it were a very few, that were very good to each other, that worked together. So what I mean by that is I think that there were people, even if it were a small amount of people, from European Americans and from Native Americans who worked together. Now, did they actually have a celebration? Did they actually have a dinner together? I'm not even going to speculate on that, meaning I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to say I wasn't there. I don't know. I obviously don't know what happened at that time. None of us really know for sure. We're all looking at the history to see what was most likely the things that happened. What were most likely the things that happened. But I know from today, a time when our country is quite divided, the most divided it has ever been in my lifetime. And there are a lot of things that I consider really wrong happening in this country. I also know there are quite a few, in fact, a lot of people who are doing really, really good things. Because of that, for me, I think celebrating Thanksgiving is very important. And even as I say that, knowing that there are people, even people I care a lot about, who disagree with me, I'm very grateful to have a place to live in a country where we can completely disagree. I'm very curious what you think, whether you live in the United States, whether or not you are a citizen of the United States, whether or not you've ever heard this story. I really want to know what you think, even if you disagree with me. Many things I've learned over my life are things I've learned from people who disagree with me. And I think that having conversations that are respectful with people that you disagree with can be a very good way to learn. Having said that, please write whatever your thoughts are, whether you agree or disagree, in the comments. But remember, if you are not respectful to other people, if you are in any way inappropriate, I will delete your comments. I am not creating a place to fight. I'm creating a place where people can learn from each other. So I think it's an important conversation to have. And speaking of important conversations, this is one of the things that I consider the most important thing to learning a language. I am learning Spanish as my second language, and having important conversations is one of the things that's most important to me as a language learner. And that's why I created my She Speaks Fluency program for women who want to be more fluent so that they can learn in a place that is safe, but also they can discuss things that are important even if they don't agree with the other people. If you'd like to have more information about how you can join us for these very important conversations and become more fluent, where you will not have to look for people to talk to because it is available to you. If you would like to work with me and you are a woman with an intermediate level of English, I would love for you to get on the wait list to the She Speaks program, which is linked in the description below. When you click on the link, you will be able to sign up for the wait list so that you will be one of the next people to be able to join this special fluency program. And while you're waiting, I will send you some ways that you can practice your English to become more fluent. So let me talk a little bit more about my personal experience with Thanksgiving and why it is so important to me. I think last year I talked a little bit about why Thanksgiving was a difficult holiday for me as a child. In short, I grew up in a family that was quite dysfunctional. In other words, the family was not working in a great way. And because of that, our holiday celebrations could be very stressful. Oftentimes, when I was a little older as a young adult, I had no one to celebrate Thanksgiving with. And these were things that made me very sad. But just as I think it's so important to focus on the positive aspects of something like Thanksgiving, I decided that it was important for me to do that with this particularly difficult thing as well. I didn't know at the time that putting this positive spin on something, in other words, looking at it in a positive way, that I would eventually build what is now one of my favorite holidays and create some of my best memories with my own children. When I first heard about the controversy, I was actually a little bit frustrated about it. But I decided, like I said before, that this is such a great learning opportunity. And now I think it is a very, very important thing. When I was a child, the only time we really talked about being grateful was at Thanksgiving. Maybe a couple of other times in the year, but not very often. And now gratitude and being thankful is one of the most important parts of my life all year long. Finding a way to practice gratitude in my life has made a huge difference in my life for the better. And it is a practice that I use that has created way less stress in my life. I have made other videos about this that I will also link below. But I know that you, as an English learner, one of the most important things you want is to become more fluent. And so, pardon me. And so why am I talking to you about gratitude? Because when we have stress, when we are in difficult times, it is very difficult for us to learn. So if we can reduce our stress even a little, it makes it much easier for us to learn. So with that in mind, if you're ready to learn more and have a way to learn more effectively, I'd like for you to watch this video next, and I'll see you there. Is really about a time, Schnackelfrat. I'll come back to that.